Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you once again for joining us here on the United Regional Chambers update. Today, we have our guest speaker is going to be Bridget Sweet. Bridget is the Executive Director of Food Safety and an Adjunct Food Safety Professor at Johnson & Wales University in Providence. She has the responsibility of all its campuses, including the ones in North Miami, Florida, Denver, Colorado, and Charlotte, North Carolina. She's a technical expert on public health and food safety matters. She is a frequent presenter on related topics throughout the country, an active participant in Rhode Island's developing food strategy, and an advocate for reliable and relevant food safety education and practices. Bridget has been kind enough to do many of these webinars, seminars for us, and she's agreed to join us today. She's a resident of Franklin, where she serves as the chairman of the Board of Health. Bridget, welcome. Thanks for coming to join us today. Dave, you need to unmute Bridget. There we go. There she is. Okay.
How are you?
Good. Thanks again for agreeing to do this. You did a wonderful one for us last week, and we're glad that we can bring it, and you'll be sharing it with us today.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Jack, just a question. What's the protocol for questions today? Are they, because I can only see my screen right now. So I just want to make sure I'm not ignoring anyone. Are they going to be answered at the end? I just want to make sure I'm following.
Dave will grab any questions that come in the chat.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks. All right, so thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I just wanted to provide, a high-level overview of food safety and some of the social distancing protocols that come into play as we're in this post-COVID sort of kitchen era. I think it's important to note that all of you that are currently operating are pretty well equipped to handle some of these challenges based upon currently following the food code. So it's just going to be more of an operational and social distancing or physical distancing aspect, depending on where you're located across the country or the region. Social and physical distancing are being used sort of interchangeably now through the CDC. So you may see it in either capacity. So again, really the intent of today is to provide a high-level overview of food safety. We really want to review those safe food handling practices, honing in on those risk factors that may cause foodborne illness. We really want to discuss the employee illness and hygiene protocols that you have previously been following and kind of the new heightened awareness of what the new normal will look like as we begin to reopen in a greater capacity. And then really discuss COVID and how it may impact your operation. What risks to food preparation there may be, and really discuss some potential training and logging pitfalls that you may come into play with over the next several weeks as you expand your current operations. Again, this is, I just want to caution everyone as well that the guidance is changing fairly rapidly. So this is what we have to date as of now, but things could change. So just be mindful of that and continue to check the COVID website for reopening risk factors and reopening guidance and things of that nature to make sure that you're moving forward in the right direction.
Great.
So right now, as you operate, you already should be following, a food safety plan. In 2018, Massachusetts went to the most recent or an updated version of the food code. So previous to October of 2018, we were actually on the 1999 food code, which was quite outdated, as you can imagine. And now currently we're on the 2013 food code. And part of the parameters of that 2013 food code are to have a comprehensive food safety plan with specific standard operating procedures. And part of those SOPs can actually include an internal inspection process. So some of the checklists that you may have obtained from the mass.gov COVID website are actually just little versions of SOPs. They're really just created checklists to help you continue your operation as safe as possible. Right now, to operate in Massachusetts, you do need to have at least one person in charge with the required food safety manager certification. So that needs to be an approved training certification either through ServSafe or NRFSP, and you need to be on site full-time or an equivalent. There are some municipalities across the state now that are actually requiring more than one person, but again, we want to have that minimum baseline level of knowledge to have a certified food protection manager on site at all times. Part of the COVID response as well is to have someone typically the person in charge, oversee a lot of these COVID checklists. So that would be whoever the person in charge is, who has your required food safety manager certification as well as your allergen awareness, should now also be responsible for some of these additional COVID protocols. So again, just a really high-level overview of what food safety is and why we care about it. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys are all in industry. You understand how important it is. That food safety is really, at this point, your reputation. But it really is a scientific discipline describing all handling, preparation, and storage of food with the overall intention to reduce or prevent foodborne illness. So there's a variety of methods and routines that you can take to avoid potential health risks. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Food safety is really a compilation of really good practices and procedures. Foodborne illness is a huge risk in the United States. We typically we have about 48 million illnesses per year related to bad food handling. So we just want to be cognizant of that. And as I tell, my students at Johnson & Wales, or people as I'm doing, some sort of consulting in the private space, is that at this time, everyone is a food safety expert. Everyone has access to your most recent inspection reports through Yelp or through the, your local municipality may publish all the food inspection reports. So it's really, really important that you go ahead and showcase and you go above and beyond your food safety standards with these enhanced COVID protocols. And what we're finding, we've actually done some market research. I have about 218 respondents to date as to what makes people more comfortable when they go out to eat. And that's that visual of a commitment to food safety as well as a commitment to disinfection. And everyone may not know what that means up close and personal like you all do running your operations, but people feel a little bit sense of comfort seeing that there is some sort of checklist in place or there is some type of procedure in place for that disinfection. And we have some examples at the end of this presentation, but just be really mindful of that. Everyone is a food safety expert. Everyone, even my kids, and they're really not. So again, just a high-level overview of the Certified Food Protection Manager and the person in charge. So as you're all well aware from your, whether it's ServSafe or NRFSP training, the food safety manager is the last line of defense before the food will reach the consumer. So it's absolutely critical that the knowledge that the food safety manager has is related back to all of your other employees. It does you no good to be the person in charge and hold all this information and not go ahead and make sure that your employees are following and abided by the food code. So we do call that active managerial control. So it's absolutely imperative that the food safety manager helps to prevent or eliminate the risk factors. And these risk factors are actually from CDC. Number one here has sort of been mitigated out because of the high level attention that's been put into the space. But number one here is food from unsafe sources. So this is really the least likely to occur right now in 2020. But again, being mindful that as you fulfill your operation that you are only using an approved purveyor. Inadequate cooking, improper holding temperatures, contaminated equipment, and poor personal hygiene are the following, and they make up the really the magnitude or the bulk of our foodborne illness risks. And for us in this post-COVID kitchen, we're most worried about poor personal hygiene. So we're really most worried about employees coming into work when they're ill or not properly washing their hands or not properly abiding to that social distancing requirement. So again, this is the newer graphic from FDA that it's really important at all times through food handling to make sure that you're cleaning, separating, cooking properly, and chilling properly. So these four things are uber repetitive through the food code. I'm sure you've seen it. You're all aware as you work through industry. So just being mindful of these absolute critical factors. Here is a huge opportunity, but pre-COVID, post-COVID, and really it's going to be a challenge forever, in my opinion, because employee hygiene is really based on employee behaviors. So you really want to be mindful of that and cognizant of that and really make sure that as you're educating your staff, they understand the why this is important. Because unfortunately, sometimes your staff don't care as much as you as an owner, operator, or a manager. So really trying to create that common bond and make sure everyone is aware of the importance of these types of behaviors. The Foodborne Illness Reporting Agreement is mandatory in Massachusetts. There is a form on the website, Mass TPH Food Protection Program, that you can print out, and it just goes through a really explicit set of definitions that are reportable to the person in charge. And depending on what these illnesses are, the employee can must either stay home or be restricted to non-food handling tasks. So that's not new. people should have been abiding by this for quite some time. The challenge now is that now we have this additional set of illnesses, this additional subset of questions related to COVID, which we'll cover again towards the end. So this is really, we're just adding on one more task to this foodborne illness reporting agreement. Part of active managerial control, again, is monitoring your employees for good hand hygiene, for good hygiene, for good uniform. And when we say hand hygiene, we really mean really good hand washing. And I know it sounds remedial and it sounds a little bit silly, but people oftentimes assume they wash their hands properly, and the reality is they don't. So 2018, I was part of a study for the Conference of Food Protection, and it took place in Houston. And we were able to actually set up GoPros in some food service kitchen areas and just not show any faces, but just show and capture hand washing exchanges. And the amount of people that did not properly wash their hands, that did not properly dry their hands, that did not use soap, so we did the quick rinse, or the amount of people that washed their hands with gloves on was absolutely staggering, especially because there was that hand hygiene poster right next to the hand sink. So doing some simple overview trainings, reminding people how to wash their hands, and the reality is that 20 seconds can be a long time when you have so many competing priorities back of house. So just being mindful and going over with your employees how to properly wash their hands could be a game changer. I use GlowGerm because I know it's a little bit silly and remedial, but I think it also really helps to highlight the fact that germs do travel. So GlowGerm is just the gel with fake cooties, and it can show whether someone's washed their hands properly or whether they've cross-contaminated various surfaces throughout your kitchen. And then glove usage is going to be a huge challenge moving forward. I'm sure we've all heard horror stories about gloves in use back of house, front of house, or wherever else. Following the COVID sort of release in mid-March, gloves apparently became like the number one commodity in the entire world, and nobody wanted to go anywhere unless they had gloves on. That's a little bit silly. I'm sure you've seen people wash their hand. I'm sure you've seen people go food shopping with gloves on. Meanwhile, they're on their phone, they're fixing their face covering, they're touching the carriage, they've got money out, they're touching their face again. And really, at the end of the day, those gloves are completely ridiculous and not necessary. So being mindful of glove usage and what that may represent to your customers is really important. So my advice, both in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and we vetted this through some different different partners, is that use gloves per the food code. So gloves are absolutely important. Gloves absolutely have a home in proper food preparation, but it's for those instances when you're handling a ready-to-eat food. You don't want to put a pair of gloves on at 8 in the morning and do 99 tasks and not wash your hands. So it's way more important right now to do that proper hand washing. I know that sometimes customers like to see the gloves, but if I've had the same gloves on for the past 6 hours, what's the point? And if people have a question about that, you can educate them. But again, just being mindful of glove usage and what that may mean front of house, back of house, and through your carry-out operations. I'd much rather you wash your hands properly than have on magic gloves. So just a quick graphic from our partners at Ecolab as to how to actually do proper hand washing. There are some really good videos on the World Health Organization, CDC, Mass.gov. There are some resources out there. And again, I know it seems repetitive and remedial, but it's also really important. So reminding your staff that this is actually a super critical component in not only COVID protection, but also food safety in general. So I think we've pretty much, or I've covered gloves pretty much at length, but not wearing gloves properly can absolutely spread germs. It can absolutely create a cross-contamination risk. And overall, it can potentially decrease your profit. If everyone's wearing a new pair of gloves every 20 seconds, you could have a challenge. On top of that, depending on where you're located or how you're set up, it can also be a trash nuisance. So that actually is still occurring in some of the towns that I support. People are complaining about gloves being left in the parking lot because people will do their task and then throw their gloves into the street. So just being mindful of what that may look like. So if your employees are wearing gloves, make sure they can still have the ability to wash their hands properly, and make sure they do have an ability to throw the gloves away properly with a no-touch trash barrel available. So a high-level view of cross-contamination, and again, I know that you guys all know this because of your certified food protection manager. certification here, but we just want to make sure that we're reminding you. And again, as you have so many competing priorities, information is changing daily. This is just intended to be a high-level overview. But cross-contamination is really important, and we really want to reduce that risk at all times. And the easiest definition is that when bacteria is transferred from one food to another or from one surface to another. So you would be able to limit your likelihood or your risk of cross-contamination through washing, rinsing, and sanitizing all your food contact surfaces. So properly setting up your 3-bay sink, all of those types of protocol. Making sure that you store your food properly at all times. Raw meat, fish, and poultry should be separated. They should be stored in the order of internal cooking temperature. And then again, making sure that we're wearing gloves properly. If something is ready to eat and is not going to be further processed, then we want to go ahead and make sure we properly wash our hands and then put gloves on. So cleaning and sanitizing. So this is always something you've had to adhere to, whether it was the 1999 food code or the 2013 food code. So you always want to ensure that we're washing, rinsing, and sanitizing all food contact surfaces before and after use. This is a little bit different. Food contact surfaces can be cleaned manually or mechanically using a dish machine. So prior to 2018, when we adopted the new food code, you were not obligated or required to take an internal temperature of your dish machine. Now, if it is going to be a high temp dish machine, you have to have some type of apparatus in place to get a daily temperature to ensure that the plate of the surface is 160 degrees. So we want to ensure there that the water coming into the rinse cycle is 182. So you have to have either an irreversible thermometer, a plate thermometer, or some type of mechanism or the disposable tea sticks, or the temperature indicators to make sure you are getting that proper temperature verification. Pot sinks must always be set up in the proper sequence. We always want to have the wash, rinse, and the sanitize, and the water temperature here is absolutely paramount as well. So I think that in general, I think as a society, we associate hot with clean. So obviously when we're going to scrape, rinse, soak before we wash our dishes. We're going to wash those dishes at 110 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. We're going to rinse them, same. But when it's time to sanitize, if you're using quaternary ammonia, you really don't want to have 110 degree temperature. Your ideal temperature here is 75 degrees, or pretty temperate water. If it's too hot, the sanitizer is ineffective. So just being mindful of that as well, and kind of spot checking and retraining. It's human nature. Like I said, we associate hot with clean, so people automatically want to fill that 3rd bay with that hot water. And what we're doing there is we're either getting a false positive on our test strip, or we're just getting, or that the sanitizer is actually dissipating out before we can use it. And then that air dry is super important as well as far as cleaning and sanitizing. So again, just a quick visual of a 3-bay sink setup. Being mindful of the clock here. The clock is in place to make sure that we are sanitizing for that 30-second contact time. Quick visual, and again, I'll make sure that Jack has this PowerPoint available to share. But a quick visual from State Food Safety. Again, just showing how food should be stored inside a refrigerator. Really making sure that our ready-to-eat foods are on top, our less processed foods, so maybe our unwashed produce, and then go into whole cuts of steak, ground beef, chicken, poultry, turkey, the like. So just making sure that whatever that highest cooking temperature food product is always stored on the bottom to reduce the likelihood of cross-contamination. Cooking and holding temperatures. Making sure that whatever we are cooking does have that final cook temp to 165 degrees for 17 seconds if it's chicken, or if it is a ground beef product, 155, so on and so forth, depending what that internal cooking temperature is. Hot holding requirement now in Massachusetts is 135 degrees. So if you're supposed to keep something hot, make sure you go ahead and keep that above 135. And anything cold you want to ensure is below 41 degrees. So kind of a high-level overview here of COVID and how COVID presents a risk in your particular operation. So the bigger challenge right now is that I think we're sort of COVID fatigued at this point. We hear COVID all the time. It's on the news. It's literally everywhere. But there is no evidence. There has been no evidence. There's been research and data that COVID or SARS cannot be spread through food. So they've actually done some data modeling and had someone like sneezed or they spread SARS particles into a food product, and even then there was still not a high enough viral load to cause illness. The challenge is that COVID is spread person to person, and when we associate going out to eat, we're going out to eat, and that we're social people, so we want to go out with other people, we want to sit down with other people, share food, share drinks, and kind of taste a little bit of everything. And the virus is thought to be spread mainly from person to person. So it's that straight on person to person spread that we're trying to control. So controlling COVID is literally antithesis to all of us getting together and enjoying a meal, having shared appetizers, going out and about, standing at a bar and ordering an appetizer. All of these things that we sort of socialize with this experience is now been sort of flipped on its head. We're not worried about the food safety parameters. We're worried about that congregating people in that close quarters and what we can do to mitigate some of those risks. So people who are within 6 feet for an extended period of time, for about 10 to 15 minutes, are what we're thought to be the highest likelihood of transmission. So we're really trying to engineer out as many of these opportunities as possible to further promote and protect public health. So and the additional challenge from March to April came to be that we're seeing a lot of asymptomatic people. So people who don't have fevers, people who don't have all of these symptoms are still at risk and likelihood to spread COVID-19. And that's where we sort of, the initial sort of recommendations were to take a temperature, to do all these other things. And because temperature is not absolutely indicative, it's much better to do, if you're gonna self-assess for temperature, you also want to check off other symptoms that may be COVID related. So it's really important that as you return to work, or if you've been working all throughout, just being mindful of return to work standards for your employees, because you want to obviously gradually reopen your doors, offer more opportunities for your guests, but you want your employees to feel safe and understand that they're not an additional risk by working in this capacity. So making sure that your employees know how COVID could be spread, really heightening hand washing. So if you set up timers and have people wash their hands more frequently, I know it's not ideal, but it's kind of dual-fold. You're protecting your customers, but you're also protecting your employees at the same token. And really, hand washing is not difficult, and it's not an engineered control. It's more of a behavior control. Making sure that everyone knows how to properly, I never changed this. So you want to make sure you cover your mouth and nose with a cloth face cover as warranted. So underneath the Executive Order 31, I think, we have to wear them in these public settings. So making sure that your employees and staff know how to wear this face covering, and that it's cleanable, and that it's breathable, and that they understand that prior to putting it on and taking it off, they should be conducting a proper hand washing. There's actually a really nice graphic from FDA as to different types of facial coverings that are allowed in a food service setting, and how you should be washing your hands, washing your face covering, things like that. There's no recommendation to sanitize your cloth face covering. You can wash it in the laundry and that will be sufficient. But also be mindful, and again, this is a challenge for me because I don't cook. I don't like to cook. I just eat. But part of your culinary experience as you're doing flavor profiles is the actual tasting, right? You, as chefs and culinarians, you're constantly sort of tasting your food product and reseasoning or doing whatever needs to be done to that food product. So be mindful. What does tasting look like now that all of your employees and staff are supposed to wear a cloth face covering? How are you going to taste safely? So previous to COVID, you're supposed to take a small sample, use a disposable spoon, move yourself away from the food prep area, taste, wash your hands, go back about your business. So as you're kind of modifying your workspace to meet some of these demands, what can you do to encourage proper tasting, as well as reduce the likelihood that your cloth face covering is going to contaminate something else? So just because you don't have COVID doesn't mean you have some other cootie that could be transmittable through that cloth face covering that you've thrown on a food prep surface. So just things to keep in mind as you go about sort of your operation. Again, avoiding close contact, maintaining that physical social distancing as best you can, cleaning and disinfecting. So this is something that's a little bit different for us in the food industry, is that we always sanitize. Now we want to go ahead and we want to clean, wash, and sanitize food prep areas, but all of these high touch surface areas, so railings, handles to reach in, handles to walk-ins, bathrooms, service tables, so where someone may have sat down outside. Now we have to go through a cleaning process and a disinfecting process. And historically, we've not disinfected in this industry. It's always been just sanitizing to reduce the pathogens to a safe level for consumption. And then really making sure that we're monitoring, health. So asking the COVID questions. There are some really good cut sheets on mass.gov for workplace standards. So you can modify those to meet your needs. There is no one size fits all. We just want to make sure that you are all adhering to these minimum standards and really promoting and protecting public health and safety. So again, social distancing is absolutely paramount. If you have to stagger your workstations to keep people separate or not facing in the same direction, that may be something that works for you. Really educating your staff onto those COVID symptoms, increased hand washing, proper use of facial coverings we talked about, really that increased disinfection. So this is something that we continue to find some opportunities for. The workplace standards checklist is a super helpful checklist, but we're finding that some people are just using whatever disinfectant or viricide they can kind of get their hands on, and be really mindful of the contact time. If you are allowing for outside seating and the contact time for that disinfection is 10 minutes, you're not going to use it properly, because there's no way you're going to have someone wait 10 minutes for the table to come into contact time. So work with your chemical vendor, research some options. There are some that are as short as 45 seconds. And in the food world, 45 seconds seems a whole lot more reasonable to me than 10 minutes. So just be mindful of that. And really the removal of self-service areas. So for the time being, no drink dispensers, no soup, no salad bars, no buffets, none of those sort of shared areas that create a queue or a line. So you may have to become a little bit more creative with what your current work flow looks like. So if you have to remove those self-service areas, what can you replace those with? Can you create a sanitizing and disinfection station that's still visible to your customers and your staff to allow for a faster turnaround time? So just be mindful of that as well. This is a poster from the mass.gov website, really just reminding people about hygiene. So again, in the food industry, we should already know these things, but we do want to be careful and make sure that we are disinfecting some of these high touch areas. And on the COVID checklist, there are some really good opportunities there for you to kind of highlight and create into your own sort of cleaning schedule. Social distancing, again, making sure that everyone is aware. Also be mindful that your vendors need to comply with your protocols as well. So if you have deliveries brought back a house and they're putting your products in the walk-in for you, revisit that. If that's something you're comfortable with, you would have them self-attest to that they don't have symptoms. They should still socially distance, or if that makes you uncomfortable and you want to keep them out of your back-of-house operation for contact tracing, that's totally within your purview. So just, again, think about some of those additional areas that we've sort of just taken for granted for quite some time. Now things are going to look a little bit different. The other challenge, and I don't know that I put a slide in for this, but again, be mindful and encourage your guests and your staff to be aware that everything is inherently going to take longer. So cleaning and disinfecting is an additional step. Wearing your facial covering. You may have to limit people in your restroom. So you might have signs outside your restroom only allowing for one person to go in at a time. So just being mindful, and I think that if you are upfront and with your communication and let people know that things may take a little bit longer than they anticipated, people will just be grateful for the experience, to be quite honest. Again, you have mandatory signage you need to place from mass.gov, so making sure that's available. You have to have some visible for your customer point of view, but also back of house in your kitchen for your staff. Just some quick examples of various social distancing. There's no right way to do this. You can be really creative with this. They're using red painter's tape. Most commonly I see is blue, but whatever works for you. This is something that I personally, as a food safety professional and former Board of Health person and working at Johnson & Wales, I really liked this because it made me feel like this particular location took this really, really seriously. So for those of you that don't know me, I have the pleasure or displeasure of having I have 4 boys, and the oldest just finished his freshman year at University of North Georgia. So he came home suddenly in March, and we had to go get his stuff actually just a week and a half ago, and drove back up from UNG back to Franklin, Massachusetts. So there were some opportunities before we were allowed to do outside dining that we were able to see some of this. I think this was in Asheville, North Carolina. So they had already kind of had outside seating, and what they did was they used this QR code for their menu. And on the right side as well, they actually had their COVID protocols for cleaning and disinfecting. So one side you got to order your appetizer and your meal. On the other side, you could actually pull up their cleaning and disinfecting checklist. And I think it just creates a commitment or a social contract with your customer that this is what you say you're going to do. And I think it creates a level of comfortability and a level of normalcy for your customer to come back. They've also earmarked tables, so it was too difficult for them to carry tables in or reallocate tables based at that time. They were on a 50% capacity. They could hold up to 50% seated service. So what they did was, rather than remove all this furniture, they just taped it off, and then they created additional disinfection stations. And the slide on the right, I think, is a little bit hard to see, but that little hickory, it says disinfection station. And they've created this sort of portable area. Again, it says employees only. It's taped off. You can't have any guests sitting there. It has a disinfectant cleaner. It has table turner cleaning wipes. One is a disinfectant. One is just a washable cleaning wipe. Hand sanitizer for the employees. A labeled cup for dirty pens. A labeled cup for clean pens. They actually had another area for checkbooks I guess, where they were being cleaned and disinfected. And then they had these little cups of salt and pepper. So because condiments can be a high touch frequent item, rather than sanitizing between every use, they were just providing these condiments in these disposable wrappers as they were requested. And again, I think that visually it's appealing and it sends a nice message to the customer. This is additional social distancing sign at that same sort of location, because it was kind of like, I guess, a legacy place or a patriot place where it had a series of restaurants and then a series of shops. So this is what the shop owner, the overall association placed, again, reminding people of these. It's not just food thing. This is an everything protocol right now. So I thought that was kind of interesting and just wanted to share. So part of the requirement in Massachusetts is signage, and you're not new to signage. You already posted your permit. You're already posting your serve safe, your allergen. So you need to also make sure that you have this explicit signage for public entrances to have them not allow if they have COVID symptoms. The facial covering required unless there's a medical exemption or they're under 2. You can actually, now that we have outside seating in Massachusetts, you can wear your facial covering to your seat and remove your facial covering upon seating. And again, making sure that there is no unnecessary physical contact. We want to make sure that you have appropriate signage. You want to make sure that you have the compliant attestation poster that is visible to both workers and visitors. So most commonly, I've seen them signed and laminated, and one posted front of house, one posted back of house. Whatever works for you guys is totally fine. And then again, ensuring that you have hand washing signs that's appropriate in all hand washing areas. There is no magic sign for facial coverings. However you decide to depict it and post it is totally up to you and your operation. There are some different variations out there, so whatever works for you is totally within the scope. And really just educating, and I think people are starting to finally get this, but a face covering really protects you from me and vice versa. It's not magic. So again, ensuring that people realize that the facial covering is not a replacement for social distancing, but it is one of the several measures we can take to prevent the spread of the virus. So I always liken it to sort of the hurdle risk factors when you're running a HACCP plan. Whatever you can do to kind of compound the likelihood of success to reduce that hazard, that's what we're doing here through facial coverings. We're not saying this is the end all be all and a facial covering is going to make COVID-19 go away, but we are saying that through responsible, limitation of symptoms, through proper hand washing, and through proper use of a facial covering, we are reducing that likelihood of transmission. This is, from my perspective, this is probably going to be your biggest challenge as an owner or an operator. They're not comfortable, or they can be uncomfortable. They can be cumbersome. They can be difficult, especially when you're working in a hot kitchen environment. I know better, and I'm a wicked face toucher. So having the facial covering on is almost like a magnet. I swear it draws my hand back to my face even more. We want to make sure that the face coverings are adequate to the task and they cover your nose and your mouth. So I'm sure you've all seen examples of people with the facial covering down by their chin, and they pull it up to just their mouth and their nose is still exposed. So we really want to make sure that you're training your staff to use these properly. They need to be fit securely and comfortable against the side of the face, and they should allow for breathing without restriction. And again, just making sure that we are properly taking it off and storing it in between use. The other challenge from our perspective is we want to make sure you're not utilizing N95 masks. Those really need to still be on hold for our first responders and healthcare workers. So please don't get in the habit of supplying or utilizing those. Again, cleaning and disinfecting, making sure that you have cleaning protocols specific to this industry, and they are available now on the mass.gov COVID workplace specific training standards. There is a process you need to employ when an active employee has been diagnosed with COVID-19. So making sure that you're following those protocols as well. And then making sure that common surfaces are properly disinfected at all times. Again, the challenge for us in the food industry typically is that we're big on sanitizing, not always disinfecting. So making sure that we remove visible dirt or food debris and then use the proper disinfectant for the proper contact time. So that should be either on your SDS sheet, your product specification sheet, or even on the product label. But making sure you're not just sanitizing, you're leaving that chemical on for the proper time to do a full disinfectant. Really important. Additional sort of opportunities and challenges as we go through phase 2, step 1, I guess, is there's been some, again, varying level of temperature monitoring. I think the request now is that you have your employees self-monitor temperature at home and then do the rest of the screening symptoms available when they're on site. There are some locations that are still maintaining or making sure that you take your temperature on site. That's fine. It's not a requirement. It's a matter of due diligence. I did take my oldest son out for his birthday Friday night at an establishment, and they did take all 3 of our temperatures with an infrared thermometer before we could even enter the facility. I think, again, that provides a level of comfort to some guests. I was just sort of like, whatever. But I mean, again, that's something for you guys to decide. It's not a requirement, but people are still doing that. Really important that you keep a good cleaning log and disinfecting log. Also ensuring that the signage is posted as required. I really would like to encourage you to create a practical cleaning schedule. Don't say that you're going to clean something every 30 minutes if it truly isn't possible and it's truly not necessary. So be mindful, do a nice comprehensive walkthrough of your kitchen and figure out where those high touch areas are, where the bottlenecks may be, and front of house. Kind of identify where those challenges might be and create those to be a higher frequency and others kind of offset or stagger. I encourage all of you to take a step back anytime you're in food production, whether it's to do a facial covering sort of assessment or just look at overall food behaviors. Just take a step back and observe your employees for a period of like 5 minutes. I know it seems like a long time. It really isn't. And just get a feel for a flow of food. Are people truly washing their hands? Are they truly cleaning and sanitizing? Just try to pick up on some of those opportunities and then make that either a pre-meal sort of discussion or a kickoff or a tailgate, however you want to cover some of those opportunities. But all too often we have so many competing priorities. It's easy to start cutting corners and cutting corners and cutting corners until you've sort of eliminated a lot of these really important steps. Training your employees on when to disinfect, whatever training or support you can give them on these facial coverings. If it's more frequent breaks to go somewhere and remove their facial covering and get some air, whatever you can kind of come up with. Creative solutions on the reduction of self-service areas. So what could that look like? Could you do a disinfection station that is a little bit more appealing to a consumer? Is there something else you can do there? Not the specific challenges for us here in Massachusetts, no preset tableware at this time still. I don't know when that will go away. So as you seat people, you can provide their tableware at that point, but no preset. You can use a menu board or a printed single-use menu or a QR code. But you cannot have reusable menus at this time. So again, whatever you come up with that makes sense for you, I would totally highly recommend. Condiments, salt and pepper should only be available upon request. And if can't be in single-use washable ramekins or something like that, then they need to be washed and sanitized and disinfected before every use. So there are a lot of opportunities here. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'd probably encourage you to go check out a restaurant that's been open for quite some time. So swing into Rhode Island, see what they've been doing, because they've been doing it since May 18th. They've already hit some of the bumps on the road. They, even if you just take a quick visual and look at how they put their floor markers down, that could give you some additional ideas as you either expand into outside dining or as you prepare to have that interior dining. Oh, that's all I got. All right, so those are my references. I'm gonna stop sharing because I talk a lot and I talk fast. How do I get out of here? Am I gone?
Dave?
I think I'm gone.
Hey, there we go.
What's up?
Awesome. Bridget, thank you very much. This is very, very informative. I know a lot of our restaurant owners and employees really needed some of this information, as well as the general public who does view these videos at times. We really appreciate you coming out and doing this for us. I shouldn't say coming out, being stuck in your house and talking to us, because we're all kind of stuck in our offices or that. A lot of the flyers and posters that Bridget mentioned, we can help you get those here at the Chamber. We have them on our social media page, or you can reach out to us here at the Chamber. We'll make sure that you get them. They're all downloadable, so you can print them out, have them up, as Bridget said, in the front of the house, have some in the back of the house, because you do have to have them for both the your customers and your employees by the new mass regulations. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Once again, Bridget Sweet, thank you very much for joining us today. And folks, if there's anything that we can do here at the Chamber to help you, please reach out. Dave, again at AACS, pop on the screen with us here. We really appreciate you putting this together and all the hard work of the team over there at AACS. You guys do a fantastic job. There he is. Hey, Dave. But once again, thank you, everybody. If there's something that we can do here at the Chamber, please reach out to us.